Welcome to the Cold Hearted Appraiser podcast. Today we're going to talk more about estate and trust real estate. And we brought in someone I do a lot of work with and who I think is excellent on this topic, and that's Sarah Rogers with the agency. Sarah, great to have you on. Tell me about yourself, your experience, and especially in the trust and estate world.
Well, good afternoon, Glenn. Thank you so much for having me aboard. Just wanted to share a little bit about my experience in this area and what I love about it and what I find interesting. I started back in 1994. Most of my business seemed to be working with attorneys on their own transactions, their personal transactions. And so the more I thought about it, I realized, well, I ought to be working with those attorneys and their clients, because that seemed like a natural fit if I'm working with them on their own transactions. How about if we just expand that universe to include the clients that they are helping? And so I would say about a third of my business is trust-related work, trust and probate, mostly in the trust area. Most of my clients are trustees, successor trustees, and also fiduciaries, such as institutional fiduciaries. But again, mostly in conjunction with the trust attorney in some fashion.
Oh, great. So, we just want to, the biggest thing, the format that I like to use is to tell some stories, tell some stories where things went wrong and we still figured it out, tell some stories where they went smoothly, and take away some lessons so that anybody listening can just pick up and benefit, not just from the sound of us having a fantastic discussion, but obviously something that's beneficial to them.
Of course.
So let's just start with a story and take it from there.
Great. Well, just to say at the outset, I think for most of these situations, the family home is the largest asset that the trust owns, assuming it's a property held in trust, or that if it's not in trust, but that is the typical setup. And so with that in mind, heirs are obviously looking to maximize the financial outcome of the sale of the property. And so with that dynamic will come, various ideas about how to achieve that goal. And that's where things get interesting. As well as the context is typically that the property is often in need of repair or system replacements, and how best to maximize value. So that's the usual kind of context around these transactions in my experience. There's one story that comes to mind, which was a property in Pasadena that I worked on. This was a trust sale with no court confirmation required. What made this one a little bit more unusual was that the property was tenant occupied. It was previously owned, the owner who used to live there, she kept this as her rental property, moved out of area when, let's just say when mom passed, her daughter was the sole trustee. Unfortunately, the trustee did not have a copy of the lease agreement, at least not at first. So there was that. So she needed to find the lease agreement and look for any further lease amendments, just to find out, all the usual things you need to know about a lease agreement.
Right.
And then what made that even more interesting as this unfolded was the tenant, who really enjoyed living there, actually wanted to purchase the property. So at first that sounded interesting to the trustee in the sense that, well, maybe I can just sell this property as is. I'll have rental income until the property closes escrow, and I don't have to spend a bunch of time getting a property ready. This is also an out-of-area trustee, which seems to be most often the case.
Yeah.
And the trustee had recently retired and was ready to start a chapter in her life of enjoyment and travel and so forth. And so what happened was, the tenant made a purchase offer direct to the trustee, and the trustee had to decide whether or not to entertain that offer and make decisions on behalf of her fiduciary responsibility as to the trust, as far as whether or not to work with that offer and to come to, the conclusion ultimately after discussing it with the trustee of, do you want to put this property in the market or not? I mean, you have some pros and cons here. Not the least of which is you just don't know
Right.
what the outcome will be. I can't guarantee an outcome going on the market, but I can tell her this much. The property needed a lot of prep.
Right.
And it also meant, obviously, the tenant being removed from the property through proper notice and so forth, then there would be no rental income. So it was a big commitment to go down the path that ultimately was decided, which was to put the property on the market after doing a lot of prep. It was a hillside property with a beautiful view. Once the property was really cleared in the back, all of a sudden it just opened up and it became this, you knew the view was there, but all of a sudden it just opened up by clearing it, got the property ready. But, there was a step there in between that was unfortunate in the sense that the tenant really put up a fight to stall, to make it difficult, to make it expensive for the trustee. And I think 6+ months went by before the trustee could actually have the property back and get to work on on the work involved and basically pay the tenant a certain amount of money to have the tenant turn over the property, turn over the keys, and let us do our thing. So that was, there was that friction, there was a decision, and then there was the leap of faith to know that, okay, hopefully this goes well. Fortunately, the outcome of the sale made the trustee very happy and made the heirs happy. Even after spending all that time getting the property ready, spending the money getting the property ready, and not having rental income all at the same time.
Right.
So,
what was there? Did the tenant make an offer?
The tenant did make an offer. I wasn't involved.
What was the price difference between their offer and what the property eventually sold for?
Oh gosh, it was several $100,000.
Not surprising.
Yeah,
we see that all the time. Where
several $100,000.
So the easy route, the offer is
Yes.
well below, even when you take into account everything else that goes into it.
Yes, I think in the end, it was more than $500,000 difference.
Right.
So, so clearly that was, obviously could look back and say, great, I'm glad for the trustee and for the heirs that was the path taken. But, all you can do is look at the comparable sales in that moment and, on a price per square foot basis, it was going to be a high number. It always would have been, the house not being a very large house in terms of square footage. And then another wrinkle of unpermitted space. I know you see that all the time, Glenn.
Yes.
And how do you value that? And so that had a bit of uncertainty for the trustee to say, well, how will the buyer and how will the future appraiser and the future lender for the buyer handle this? And will we come out all right on this?
Right.
So, and they certainly did. So I think, anybody who has a property that's leased and, in this case, this trustee had not been at this property for quite some time. It certainly would have been helpful if she had that lease agreement up front. That goes without saying.
Right.
And had the contact information handy for the tenant, all the usual things that you think.
So that leads to one of those questions of we talk about real estate, we talk about values and things like that. But if you know you're going to be the trustee, or you know you're the trustee for somebody, what might you do if you're in that situation now and you don't have that information and the person you're trustee for is still alive? What should you do to prevent the extra issues that you ran into?
I would get a copy of, certainly the lease agreement, all lease amendments. I would have a set of keys. I would have the information about the insurance, the insurance agent, a copy of the insurance policy. I would actually get a not just a property profile, but I would have a preliminary title report run. I mean, any, real estate agent could get in contact with his or her title representative and have that. and just make sure there are no liens on the property that are other than perhaps a mortgage, but other than that, making sure that title is clear. That can be checked periodically. I think having certainly the tenant's contact information and knowing if the tenant has pets, just knowing that the insurance is an insurance policy that is a landlord policy, not not an owner. Because in this case, this was the property owner. In this case, it was her mother. It was her mother's primary residence until her mother moved elsewhere and kept this as a rental. So when I got involved in this, I wasn't involved in the landlord-tenant matter. It was more preparing the property for sale on behalf of the trust. Right. So I wasn't there to look at the insurance, but I do bring that topic up with rental property owner clients, making sure that they do their due diligence with insurance to make sure it's the right type of policy. Yes. So in case there is a claim, the insurance doesn't say, oh, well, you have the wrong kind of policy.
Yeah. Well, insurance seems to become a bigger and bigger problem on many fronts. We've had the fires. We have, obviously, tenant insurance, landlord insurance, and just the change in insurance issues throughout the state. Having your insurance in order seems to be a pretty smart thing to do no matter what.
Absolutely. I think that's just part of, due diligence.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Well, that's where your experience makes a big difference in those particular situations as well. So what? So in figuring out how to talk them into selling the property and going through what was obviously a lot to go through to get ready, what was the process of your discussions with them that they ultimately made the best decision where they made made the most money?
Well, I think it always starts with gathering the information. So we started with property inspections just to get a handle on system updates, or in some cases lack thereof. Yeah. So it took time to gather the bids from the usual categories of contractors, whether it was hardwood floor, paint, roof, and so on. And landscaping. So our goal was to refresh the property. We gathered all that information. Of course, while time is passing, we're rerunning comparable sales data and staying on top of what's happening in the neighborhood. And keep in mind, this trustee is out of area, right? And in travel mode. So down to communicating appropriately, but we put together a spreadsheet with all this information, and when we ran our data, I think the argument was pretty clear to put the property on the market and refresh it, and lean on that view being where the next party should be coming in and falling in love with the setting, the location, even though there's the square footage is not substantial. Right.
So the cleanup to get more value out of it, kind of just from your experience, both in this one and other situations, what's a good, I don't know if it's a ballpark or what, but where you do some work to get real benefit and don't do so much that you don't benefit from it. In your final, return on what you do to improve it. What kind of improvements do you make that bring the best returns in these situations?
Well, for example, in this case, it was a full repaint of the interior. It was ready for it. The tenant, having lived there for several years, there was just the usual wear and tear. And then also just having the colors inside be consistent. Again, a smaller space. You're not going to want to have a blue bedroom and a pink bedroom and a white bedroom and a whole different set of colors and floor styles. So we replaced where there wasn't hardwood floor. We replaced carpet. Most buyers are going to prefer the hardwood floor, but that's a decision for the owner. That was a leap to spend more money that I didn't think the owner needed to do in this case for that. The landscaping was a big part of the spend. Nice material, good mature trees, shrubs, etc. So it's a lot of trimming, a lot of clearing, and refreshing for curb appeal, and just really going through health and safety items. So having all of those inspection reports, it felt like the buyer in this case would be doing an update on the kitchen, doing an update on the bathrooms, which is often the case.
Right.
But making them functional, clean, even if still dated, and
right.
And they were, and that's how that's how it turned out. And so I think also the buyer coming in, and buyers in this case, because it was a multiple offer situation, I think the expectations were well managed for the buyer as to what improvements or replacements they would be looking to do, whether it's a roof replacement in the next few years or it's a repiping that's, probably on the horizon, but
right.
nothing urgent either.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the benefit was doing some mostly cosmetic, make it clean, make it fresh, really take advantage of the landscaping and just make people visually see how great this property can be, especially once they do the things they're going to want to do.
That's right.
No real benefit to trying to remodel the whole thing, obviously, because it takes longer and more money, and then do you spend too much and not get the return? So, yeah, that's a great story with a great takeaway on that front. Any other takeaways from that story that you think is important?
I think that pretty well covers that one. Mm-hmm. We all have our stories. I have another one for you. I
would love to hear another story.
Okay.
I could talk about real estate forever. So just keep on rolling.
Well, there's another story that comes to my mind that's a trust sale, no court confirmation required. The property is in San Gabriel, single-family home. Overall condition, not bad, dated, lived in, typically what we see. Nothing structurally wrong, nothing like that, but just opportunity to refresh, right? And what made this one a bit unusual is, let's see, so in this case, this was a family of 4 kids, grown children, and the parents had passed. And as a matter of fact, when they had me out to the house, I remember they must have just had the funeral because the flowers were just starting to weather.
Yeah,
and so it was all very fresh. And so so 3 sons, 1 daughter. The daughter is the youngest in the family, and it became clear to me later why the parents chose the daughter as the sole trustee. She's very capable. She's really on the ball with making decisions and being very pragmatic. I really didn't, in fairness, get a chance to get to know the brothers that well. Mm-hmm. But at least kudos to her for being on top of things. And I think that was a good choice as far as how the parents went about the selection of trustee. But anyway, one of the sons was an occupant in the home.
Those are always fun.
So those are always interesting, right? So I remember when I first came into the home, I thought, "Oh, what is that smell?" Oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
And so, that brother, I don't know that he had a job. I don't really know. But he seemed to be home quite a lot, and we had to work hard to get rid of the marijuana smell in this home, and it was quite pervasive, to be honest with you. It was in the carpet. It was just in seemed to be every fabric of the home. So my recommendation there, once I had a chance to get to know them, was to refresh, and I made a plan, gave a list of recommendations. What was interesting was, and I thought this was actually a great setup, was the trust attorney had a meeting at the house with the 4 grown children and went over roles and responsibilities, that being really for the trustee, right?
Oh, wow. That's
and
impressive.
So I could tell there was a feeling, or I could sense anyway, a feeling of, why did mom and dad choose my sister? And she's the youngest. I just got that vibe right away.
As an older brother, I would definitely wonder that.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see that with some families. And, it's the family dynamics that make this interesting
yes.
and make this challenging. And when we have a situation with siblings who get along, it's hallelujah. It's great. But more often than not, there's some sort of, there can be tension, or maybe it's not even tension so much as it's just goals are maybe not in alignment.
Right.
And so it takes a little bit of effort, in some cases a lot of effort, to get parties on the same page. So I thought what was great about this one was the trust attorney sat down at the house in person with myself, with the 4 grown children, and explained their sister's role as the trustee and invited their input in the way that it was, would like to hear from you, but at the same time, your sister's been chosen as the trustee. So she has the sole authority to make those decisions, whether it's setting the price, the listing price on the property, whether to spend however much she felt was necessary to spend to fix up the house. One brother had a lofty idea about listing price, and that sometimes comes up. One brother was kind of a go-with-the-flow personality and didn't seem to have a real strong kind of opinion. Mm-hmm. And then the brother who lived there, who my main thought was just, we need to get him out of here.
Yes,
we can't have this. This is not going to help your sale to have him here with his habits. And quite frankly, the house would sell for undervalue, in my opinion, if we left it in the condition it was in.
Yes.
And I don't think that's what the parents would have wanted.
Right.
I didn't know their parents, but so I think that was a very important meeting that we had with the trustee and her siblings, her brothers, and the trust attorney. And it really, I felt, empowered my client, the trustee, to make decisions. Now, I'm sure she had input here and there behind the scenes from her brothers. I'm sure she fielded questions. But she did give periodic updates as she saw fit. And that was what was explained to them was, you will be heard. We want to include you, but it's her choice. It's her decision, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was very productive. In the end, this property, which had some challenges with its location as well, it's a property that's also very close to commercial. So for some, that can be a real positive as far as your walk score looks really good.
Yeah.
But almost too good because it's almost next door to to the pros and cons of being near commercial.
Yes.
So
yes.
So in the end, I think once we established roles and responsibilities and there was alignment, then I could focus on my role. It reduced, hopefully, the stress for my client, which dealing with the stress of her siblings, I think, is, what I was anticipating. Then I think we were on the right track. And so, but I do think having some sort of a meeting early in the process, as early as reasonably possible, and in this case, it was just really nice that it was in person. There's just something about an in-person meeting, sitting there at their parents' dining room table.
Right.
And
where they'd sat how many times in their life.
That's right.
Right.
So I thought that was very, very productive. That doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it's out-of-area trustees, out-of-area siblings. So maybe these days it's a Zoom call.
And how many trust and estate attorneys that you've dealt with would do that in that situation?
Actually, it's the only trust attorney I know of who's actually done that now.
Wow.
Maybe it's just been the circumstances. In this case, all the siblings are local and they could drive to the property, and that wasn't a problem.
I'm sure there's times where you can't do that.
I'm sure there are times where, I've had clients who are overseas or back east or what have you, but this one, I just felt like that really put us on the right track.
Yeah, it sounds like the people who passed away did the right thing of appointing one person as a trustee, because you hear that in our world, well, just one, don't do multiple. And I would think that part of them doing that was that they had a great trust attorney who really made that point, who then came and put a stamp on it like, this is it, this is why, and this is how it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And So multiple steps there that just made it easy. How challenging would that have been if they had been 4 co-trustees or 2 of the 4 co-trustees?
I think it would have been very challenging, to say the least. I think we would have really struggled to arrive at agreements at every step of the way. I think we would have had a challenge with setting the listing price. I think we would have had a challenge with the scope of work. I think we would have had a challenge with how to go about the offers and negotiate on those offers. I have no doubt. It would have been very challenging.
Yeah. So for me, immediately, the 2 takeaways are hire a great estate planning attorney and only do 1 trustee, right? Really do it right up front. And I hear this story so many times just in the industry, and that's just a great example of that. What other takeaways on this one, outside of that, the obvious, what other takeaways from that story, good or bad, right? Could be a challenge that you ended up facing anyway, or just another benefit of them doing it right.
Well, another aspect I didn't mention that I think they did right was when it came time to interview for agents. Actually, the trustee doesn't live exactly in this area, but another part of Los Angeles.
Okay.
Far enough that local contacts here are not maybe top of mind. So the trustee went to her real estate agent in her area and sought a referral of a top agent in the area in which her parents resided, and conducted her process by way of referral, which is always, I think, a smart way to go about this process, whether it's asking the trust attorney for referrals or asking, your local relationship with your realtor for a colleague who's trusted. I don't remember right now if they had interviewed other agents. That part I don't recall, but I do recall I was referred by another agent, and I actually didn't know that agent. So I had an interview first with the trustee's agent.
Oh, wow.
And so looking for fit, looking for experience in this, not just the neighborhood, but the nature of this kind of sale. And once that realtor from another part of Los Angeles gave her client, this trustee, a recommendation, then it went from there.
Right. Okay, great. So, man, that's such a great story. So as we wrap things up here, just 1 or 2 simple takeaways. Somebody's inherited a home. They've got to find an agent. They got to figure out if they want to sell or not. What are just some big highlights for you that people should look for when they're trying to make that decision, when they're put in that responsibility?
Well, so Glenn, I think what's important here is the strength of referrals and going to trusted professionals, whether it's starting with the trust attorney, because for some that's where the relationship starts. The trust attorney who established the trust, as we know, may or may not still be in practice.
Yes.
And if there isn't a real estate relationship with someone in the real estate profession, I think it makes sense to start there, or with the financial advisor who's part of that team, because just the strength of those professional relationships. I mean, once in a while it comes from someone else. Maybe it's from the tax advisor, but oftentimes it's within that kind of ecosystem of professionals. And I think, so I think the takeaway is someone who clearly has experience in not just the location, but this type of sale, and just honestly the skill set of navigating family dynamics. Right? Because that's a big part of this. And then having the team and the bandwidth to have that discussion and plan and decision around the topic of the property preparation. Because if it's parents in many cases who have aged in place, seems to be the most common setup, then most commonly that largest asset has also fallen into, not always, but many times has fallen into some sort of disrepair or is just dated, but is going to need to have a conversation around what's the proper preparation and timeline and expenses and so forth.
Absolutely. How many siblings do you have?
I have 5 siblings.
Oh, that might explain your area of expertise in dealing with siblings when somebody inherits a home.
Well, I think it does have something to do with it. I'm from a big family, and my husband's from a big family. He's one of 9.
Oh, wow.
So between the two of us, we have,
Dynamics.
lots of family dynamics and
Yeah.
fun and events going on all the time. But just I do think that plays a part for me being the youngest of 6 with a big age gap.
Right. Yeah.
So
Great. Well,
this has been fun, Glenn. I appreciate your time.
Well, such a great information, such great takeaways, so many key points, and I really appreciate you coming, taking the time, and I just appreciate our relationship in business, in the world of estate and trust, and I love having an expert in my field that I can, connect with.
Well, I appreciate you and your expertise and your team, so looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And that's all for today's estate planning episode with Sarah Rogers of the agency.